Signore e signori, buonasera. Welcome to Tutti a Casa, brought to you by Casa Italiana zerilli-marimò, New York University. Tonight we have the distinguished pleasure and privilege to have with us Igiaba Scego, Italian writer, Roman writer of Somali origin, and I would say also one of the most prominent public intellectuals in Italy right now. And I deliberately use this expression with all its Gramscian echoes that it might have in all of us. And to discuss with Igiaba, we invited Candice Whitney. Candice is a researcher, writer, and international education professional. She's based in New York City. She was in Italy with a Fulbright in 2016 and 17, and she conducted research that explored the diversity of African women's entrepreneurial projects and the way in which those interrogate and challenge the stereotypes about the African diaspora in Italy. During that time, she also studied racial politics and explored language to describe privilege in Italy. We couldn't have a better interlocutor to discuss and to engage in this conversation with Igiaba. Igiaba Scego, as I told you, is a very prominent writer. She has published several books. Her most recent one is the one on which we're going to concentrate tonight, and it's La linea del colore. It came out a few months ago with Bompiani, and it's about to be translated into English. And we're going reverse. Her previous titles are Adua, Giunti 2015, and the previous novel, Oltre Babilonia, Beyond Babylon, that has already been translated into English. And Igiaba will discuss that briefly with Candice in just a few minutes. I just want to remember, I mentioned these three because they're part of a trilogy. Among the other titles, I would like to remember La mia casa dove sono, Rizzoli 2010, that won the Premio Mondello in 2011. Pecore Nere, that she co-wrote with Gabriella Curuvilla, Laila Vadia, and Ingi Mudiai. And Roma Negata, and we're going to talk about that because it's the book that Igiaba wrote with beautiful photographs by Rino Bianchi. And since Rome is going to be one of the centers of our conversation with Igiaba, because I immediately connect her voice and her image to the city of Rome that she loves passionately and that she knows like few others, we're going to go back also to that book, that it's a photographic book about the colonial past of Italy as it is represented in the streets of Rome, in monuments, palaces, statues, and so on. Without further ado, I would like to ask Whitney and Igiaba to start telling us about Future. That is one thing that I didn't mention. I just found out also that Igiaba wrote a biography of Caetano Veloso that is actually one of my favorite singers ever, Brazilian. And Future, let's talk about Future. What is Future? It's in Italian for now. Candice is working on a project to translate it into English. Tell us something about that. We're going to start with Future.
Thank you for the introduction, Stefano. I'd like to let Igiaba first share, and thank you for inviting us. I'd like Igiaba to actually share about Future. As you know, Igiaba, you are the curator and editor for Future.
Yeah, I say I'm so happy to be with you tonight because it's a really. It's like to be in New York in a way, and I'm so really happy to be in New York with an online system. But it's a really wonderful experience. I remember my wonderful experience in New York, and I want to say something about Futuro or future because I want to do something for the future of our country, because we have a big problem with the black skin here in Italy sometimes, you know, for the colonial past and for the present, because a lot of sons and daughters of migrants in Italy live in Italy like a foreigner in their nation because for the law of the citizenship. And I remember when the FAQ, the publisher, it's a little publisher from Florence, asked me to do an anthology about migration. I say, okay, I think a little bit about this. And I think I don't want to do an anthology about migration because I've done before in 2005, 2006. The title was Italiani per vocazione. I really didn't like that title, but it's really, I remember that it was powerful anthology with some really powerful short stories. I remember Cristina Alifara, Rap di Punt, is a really is history about the second generation in Rome, Somali second generation, and the memories of Somali ancestors. So Cristina, I remember, did a big job with this connection with the present and the ancestor of Somali people. And I've done before an anthology about migration, and I decide and I propose to the publisher to do something new, something aside of this migration, because we are Italians more than migrants sometimes, you know, we are half and half, because we live the experience of migration from the parents, from the relatives, but we are Italian in a new way, because we are Black Italians. And of course, I'm a woman, and I think I want to hear other women like me. I want to share my experience with them. And I decide to put together in this anthology the people from different age. Some of the writers in this anthology came from my generation. I'm 46, I'm old, I'm so sorry, I'm quite old now, yeah, but from my generation, people from around 40s and 50s. But in the conversation with the new generation, people in their 20s, and Wissal, for example, one of the authors of this anthology, she is 24, so really young. And another things that I do is put together a different part of Italy, because there are people from Padova, Turin, Brescia, Caserta, Rome. So it's because we are Black, we are women, but we are Italian in a different way. It's not same to be Roman or to be from Milan or from Turin. And the other things that I want to do in that anthology is Africa, because Africa is not a country. Africa is a big continent, 54 countries, and Afro descendants here, Afro-Italians, are from different parts of Africa too. So in this book, there are people from Sub-Saharan Africa, people with the, you know, the ancestor or parents or relative from Burkina Faso, from Nigeria, from Eritrea, Tunisia. So we are different African, different Italy. And this is, for me, is something really, when I've read for the first time the short stories and say, this is wonderful, because so powerful, so angry in a way. They are so furious from the situation in Italy towards Black people, and all we and the writers of this anthology live a systematic racism, discrimination all the time, and we are furious from this discrimination. But for me, it's interesting the way that they told their stories, and so really interesting for me, because for my generation was so important to do fiction, novels, and for this generation is the important is to create a biography. The biography is a way to understand the world. It's not biography, it's a more memoir, more something centered in their experience, and this experience stay in the pages. So I understand a lot of things about the generation when I've read for the first time this short stories. I don't know if they are short stories. It's something that is more. It's something more. Is experience in a way, literature in another way, and j'accuse. It's a way to say to Italy, Italy, you are different. We are Italians. You have to understand this. It's something, you know, it's like Black Lives Matter. You know, we say the same thing in this anthology. Black lives matter and women lives matter in a way.
Thank you for sharing. It's so true that Future is a groundbreaking book in Italy, and it's the first of its kind, as it is a compilation of short stories and essays written by 11 African descendant women, Afro-Italian women in Italy. And it's true that you described the book as a j'accuse, and just an opportunity for Afro-Italian women in Italy to state that, you know, these are the types of injustices that have been imposed on African descendant women, but also an opportunity to really build what that new future, what those new possibilities may look like. So Future is a really exciting anthology, and to me, it seems like it really joins the company, as Dr. Camilla Hawthorne mentions in the preface. It joins the community of books like This Bridge Called My Back and Showing Our Colors, Afro-German Women Speak Out. And so I do want to ask one question before we transition to the other books. And so you shared about how you started Future, and in the introduction you describe it as a j'accuse, and it's not just limited to the publishing industry, all of Italy. And I'm curious to know your thoughts on what other steps might need to occur in Italy to increase just signing authors of African women descent, and making increasing readership, making publishing more of an affordable living in Italy. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, okay. This is an interesting question because the situation in Italy is a little bit different from United States, because the Black writers are not so many in Italy, you know. And I have an idea about the publishing world. We need writers, but we need editors, and we need people that stay in the machine, you know, of the industry of publishing. We need to change, you know, a little bit the focus, because they are the publisher here are all white, you know. This is a big problem, and sometimes they translate more from United States, and they don't do scouting from people that live here. And this is happening to Brazil, because I know a lot of things about Brazil, because I love Brazil. And in Brazil and Italy, in a way, they live the same situation, because the people prefer to translate people from United States. This is wonderful. I love this, because Italian people have the opportunity to read American books, American different, you know, or writer from United States, even, you know, Black. In that moment, there is a lot of Black people in, you know, our bookstores. So it's wonderful. Afrofuturism, for example, or, you know, Colson Whitehead, the books of Toni Morrison, and, you know, masterpieces. But they don't try to find the Black voices here. So this is crazy for me. And for this reason, I try to do, I do Future. And for this reason, I want to explain something to my world, because I'm a writer, and literature is my world. I want to explain something that Black people, and not all Black people, migrants in general, and the sons and the people like me, second generation, they are involved in the industry before. I think people like Gabriela Curuvilla with Indian heritage, Cristina Alifara, Gabriela Germandi, or Amara Lacoste. There are a lot of people, really, and they forget to find other people like us, you know, because I became a writer when Gabriella and Cristina became a writer. We are all together in this adventure. But we are in a moment we became lonely people, because there are few people, only us, and we need more. No, for that reason, I did Future, for discover, to do scouting in a way. And now I have an idea. I don't know if I can, I hope so, but I want to do a male section of Future, because one of the problem here is black men, because black women, we know, and there are a lot of influencer in internet, for example, in the social, in the Twitter, like Oisa, or we are writers like Esperanza Ripanti and other Jara Khan. We have a lot of really powerful women, but we need powerful men too. So, and this is a big problem, because Italy, I don't know, is scary from black men in a way. This is a danger, if you want, for example, to do a cover of the book with a black man, it's impossible in Italy. So I want to hear the voice of my colleagues, for example, Adil Mauro or Angelo Boccato. They are really talented. So we need to mix women and men in other projects. I have this project in my mind. I have a lot of projects in my mind always, but this is something that I think a lot. We have to change the behavior towards our body, because black body is not dangerous. Black body is okay. It's a body that want to share experience, and it's not a body, foreign body. It's an Italian body, because the Italians have to understand that we are Italians like them. So this is important for me. And for example, the races against black Italians is really hard to do, and it's hard to live, and for that reason we need more stories from us.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. And I appreciate learning about these future projects that you have to include.
I hope, because it's in the future project, it's in my mind.
Sure.
It's not, I want to convince FAQ. I say, FAQ, maybe we have to do something with, but sometimes it's not easy, because with the COVID-19, the situation of the publishing world is a little bit changed. But I think we need more voices, and not only for black people. I know I of course I'm black, and I'm interested in black people, but you say you mentioned the anthology with about the creator, I think, was Gloria Anzaldúa.
Yes.
So I'm so interested, because I learned Spanish in university. I'm so interested in South America, in Italy, because there are a lot of people from Peru, from Brazil, from Argentina. We have a lot to do in Italy, really, because we have a lot of connection. It's not, became Italian now is more like United States or UK, more mixed. Yeah.
Yes. No, thank you for sharing. It's really exciting to just learn about these projects that you aspire to accomplish, as well as just the overall interest that you have. And just to add on the piece about translation, I believe that in the United States there needs to be more pieces translated, especially from Afro-Italians into English. And so Erin Robertson did an amazing translation of Oltre Babylonia, and Barbara Afosu-Samo and we are working right now on a translation for Future, because we, for us as Black women who have lived in Italy and really have strong positive relationships with Afro-Italian women, we want readers in the United States and in general in the English-speaking world to feel that admiration and just really put those voices out there, especially as you have done, Igiaba, as a Afro-Italian woman, as an African descendant woman in Italy. You are leading this movement and holding space for your contemporaries, at least with, for example, with Future, which I think is really important. And so I do want to transition to...
but I want to ask you something. I'm so curious.
Sure.
how do you live in Italy like Afro-American? Because I'm Afro-Italian, of course, and I know Afro-Italian problems, but you are a foreigner and you came here with your body, your black body. And how about this? This is something that I ask to Afro-American, because they are different, behavior. Some people live a dolce vita, the postcard Italy. And I love Italy. It's my country, but I know that we are living in trouble, and we live in, it's like you live in paradise and hell in the same time. In a side you are in hell, and in another side you are in paradise. And some Afro-American that I know, they live really a good live here. They enjoy a lot Italy. And one a friend of mine say, for me, stay in Italy is like freedom from violence of the United States. They say, I want to say, please explain to me more. And say, it's not easy to be black in the United States. And I say, it's not easy to be black in Italy. And she say, okay, but the violence is not the same. And I want to ask you about this, because I'm so curious really to understand.
Thank you for your question. So just to respond at least to the latter part about escaping violence, I don't believe that as a African-American woman, I'm escaping violence. Of course, there are definitely just different privileges, as I'm aware of, that for some reason in Italy, Italians often view African-Americans as like this amazing upgrade thing. And to me, I've experienced that, and I've seen that, and I've also experienced the violence too. And I'm also aware of just how, there is, there are the insults, there are the physical reminders of, such as with the statues that to me are like the Fontana dei Mori. To me, that's like putting a lynching in stone. And so to me, there are just many similarities between what people in the US as Black Americans experience between what happens in Italy. And of course, there are nuances. And I think it's really important, especially for me as someone who has been to Italy translating Future, to really learn from Afro-Italian women, because there's so much to learn from Italy. I mean, the history of biological racism is in Italy. There's so much to learn, including from.
I think it's Spain before Italy, but
yes,
because Spain, it's the
yes.
the key moment of race problem with the limpieza de sangre, with the pure blood. It's
Yes.
the old story. But it's interesting because I think that we Afro-American and Afro-Italian, we have to share experience. It's really important to do, because it's amazing. I want to speak about George Floyd in the end of this conversation, because I want to speak about, because it is important. But I want to say something before, is when George Floyd died, the mother of George Floyd, the execution of George Floyd, I feel pain, because our black body is the same black body. And for that reason, I think Afro-American and Afro-Italian are different, because behind us, Afro-Italian, there are colonialism, and behind you are slavery. But so we have to understand that the history is the history of violence behind us. So this is very important. For me, it's the key point, in my life. I always think that I have to understand the history of my country if I want to fight the racism. Because the racism is not something deep in the country, it's something that came from the past, and we have to understand this before.
Definitely, I agree. I completely agree, and I feel that as, at least as an African-American woman that does fight for anti-racism, it's also important to have these understandings of colonialism. Otherwise, to me, it just seems incomplete. And so that is really key. And So I feel like we could talk for so much more on this specific topic, but I do want to transition us.
Maybe this is an idea for Stefano. Maybe next time we have to do, you know, a panel with Afro-American and Afro-Italian share experience all together, because I think it's powerful, and yeah, I want to do. Maybe one day.
And not only, because I mean, part of the reason too, I think that reading works by Afro-Italian women is so important is because it's really, and I think it's important to not center the experience on African Americans, and it's really important to just, not always just put at times in comparison too, right? And so I really value just those opportunities to learn from Afro-Italian women and just what that, the history and the experience, because sure, there are differences, but I feel as if like it really needs to be like a, something, it just needs to be something that is not always in comparison, if that makes sense. And giving it the space that it, that it needs to have, so those truths can be told. And so I do want to transition though to Beyond Babylon, which was beautifully translated by Erin Robertson and was published last year and received the Penheim Awards, and was also a finalist for one of the top translations in 2020. And I'll just give a brief introduction of the book, but it's just a beautiful multi-generational story of 4 women, so 2 mothers and their daughters and their father, and it's set in 8 sections, each of the chapters neatly organized in their perspectives and trading off on each perspective. And so I do want to paraphrase a bit of Erin Robertson's words here for PEN America, for when he described Beyond Babylon. And so he says that the central theme in Beyond Babylon is the experience of national trauma in Italy, or Igiaba's motherland, and 2 of the countries and 2 other countries are in the book, Somalia and Argentina. And so the Italian government's attempts to create a fascist hegemony in all of these 3 countries has had lasting effects that make it impossible for the reader to consider these national histories in isolation. And so the book just shows how people experience trauma that isn't separate from the national histories, but also healing. And so while reading the book, one of the things that I noticed is that how the characters heal from erasure, especially. And so just to give an example, I remembered that Zura, one of the protagonists, she experienced assault and sexual violence on her body. And when she goes to Tunis to learn Arabic along with the other women protagonists, she describes the slow pace as something that calms her down. And so in the book, I noticed that there's a lot of healing that's done by individuals. But I wonder when there are nations and institutions that put that trauma on people, how might institutions that have had that role of committing national or international trauma help in this collective healing process?
Okay. Yeah, Beyond Babylon for me is a mystery, and I want to say that because I remember when I've written this book. It's 13 years ago, and I'm another Igiaba Scego. I'm another person, and I remember that I'm so interested in colonialism, but in that moment I'm focused in multicultural society. I want to describe the people and the connection of the people, and in that moment I'm focused in Spanish literature and South American literature. For this reason I add Argentina, because when my father and my mom came in Italy in 1970 as a refugee, in that moment in Italy there are 2 kinds of refugees: people from Horn of Africa and the people from South America, Argentinian and Chile and Brazil. And for this reason, I think I want to write a book about refugee, but in a different way. In that moment, 13 years ago, it's not like now the people even don't think a lot about, you know, refugee stuff and refugee problems. But for me, I'm a daughter of refugees. I know this story. And I want to add two families, one from Argentina, one from Somalia, but no, without men. It's a strange family. It's a sisterhood in a way, you know, because it's all women in this book. But it's interesting, the connection of the pain of dictatorship, because Argentina live horrible dictatorship, and Somalia too. So we share this horrible experience. And another thing that I put in this book is, you know, multilingualism. Yeah, in a way, a lot of languages, because in that moment, and interesting things is all the books was based in Tunisia, because I this is autobiography, but the book is not autobiography. I try to learn Arabic. I failed, but I try. And I remember that I went to Tunisia and with Bourguiba school, it's Arabic school, and it's so really, I'm so fascinated about this school, about Tunisia, and all the people there that want to learn Arabic. So I try, and I find the scenario of my book. The scenario of my book is this school of Arabic, and all the story is around this country. And it's amazing because I've written this book before, you know, Arab Spring. And but when I've read now the book, the translation of Aaron, I say, oh my God, I see something about Ben Ali, about the revolution of in Tunisia. And this is amazing for me, because maybe you like a writer, you understand more than you feel sometimes. You when you write, you understand more when you speak with the people. So it's quite amazing for me. And of course, one of the main reason that I try to do this big history with a lot of characters and a lot of things is colonialism and the violence. And in this book, there is a sexual violence, but not all the victims are women and the men, because sometimes we forgot that men are victims of violence too, rapes too. So, and I remember that I tried to create this relationship with a wife and her husband, and they share the secret of violence. And this is really something that I want to describe, because sometimes I put the sexual violence in 3 books: Adwa, Beyond Babylon, and De la Linea del Colore, Color Line, maybe. I don't know the title in English even, but it's La Linea del Colore, because I'm interested in the moment that your body is in pain, your black body, because it's not only a body, it's a black woman or man body. So it's quite something that I've learned from Afro-Americans, because all my life I read James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and you know, Ralph Ellison, and so on. And I've learned that you are in danger. You are like black man or black woman, you are in danger. You live in danger all the time, because the people you see you, but the people think this black is maybe a smuggler or a dangerous man, and I have to kill him, or do something really bad to him, because I want to survive. You know, white men want to survive to kill black men. This is the story that we know with George Floyd. We see what happened with the black bodies, and I want to explain this in a colonial, you know, frame. And for me, this book is a mystery, because after 13 years, I think it's not my book. It's a book of the readers. It's in a book of Aaron in a way, because reborn again in English language, and it sounds so good. So it's not really easy to translate this book, and I think that Aaron did a good, wonderful job. This is a really wonderful job, and yeah, it's
Yeah,
about,
no,
yeah.
I agree. The translation is really beautiful, especially as there are so many different languages that exist, and in the novel, just so many different places too. And he just is able to really put it all together seamlessly. And so I completely.
I want to say something about Beyond Babylon that I remember now. I remember when I did the tour of this book 13 years ago. A lot of women came with the book, for signature, for to talk with the writer and so on. And always they told me their violence that they live in the family. Always something about their experience, and this is so powerful. Never happen again with another book. Really, the people came and say, I'm raped, so I have a problem, with my husband is violent, or this is something really hard for me, because I'm not psychologist, but there are something in that book that put the people to share their experience with me. So it's quite, I remember this from all of Italy, black women, white women, black men, white men. So it's quite interesting, and quite, you became, it's a big responsibility for a writer, because we are, only a writer, no a doctor. But I remember that I think a lot about writing in that moment, because something in the literature, there are something in the literature really powerful, not in all my literature, in general, in literature, because the people share experience with you, and you are, nothing for them. You're so strange.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. It really just made, when you were sharing about what your reader shared with you 13 years ago, it made me think of how just in the book, you're able to connect how these national traumas impact people to then even further inflict.
But it's not only national. Sometimes it's your trauma, your family.
Exactly.
Trauma.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your life, And this is interesting for me, because I speak about colonialism, I speak about racism, and a white woman came and say, you speak about me. I remember with Adwa, above all Adwa, it's wonderful, because the people say, oh my God, this is my experience, like, woman from south of Italy, and this is a wonderful, I think this is the magic of literature. You are,
yes.
Yeah, it's so wonderful, really.
No, I completely agree. I do believe that's the power of literature, and folks really being able to just learn more about themselves and other parts of just the world in general through literature. And so thank you for sharing that. And actually, while you were speaking, I was just had some more ideas for Stefano for an event. Igiaba, you had shared doing an event with African-American women and Afro-Italian women. Something that came to mind for me while we were talking about Beyond Babylon was even an event just opening it to folks from other African descendants in other European countries or from the Mediterranean to really just see like what those how those similarities and differences, since as you mentioned, Igiaba, there is that violence on the body, not only, also of course art and beautiful things do happen and people do create. So I think it would be really cool to just see how that exists in with folks from different nations. And so I do want to be mindful of time, and move us along. And so next up is, it would be great if we could talk about La Linea del Colore. And so I know, Stefano, you have some questions
Yes.
specifically for Igiaba.
Thank you. And I would have many questions for you too. And as you both said, all these topics you have touched upon, and it was fascinating by your conversation, deserve to be expanded and have their own time. And as Casa Italiana, with my staff at the Casa, we are discussing that. We are thinking about creating a series about minorities in Italy and diversity in literature, and especially in contemporary literature, and not only in literature. So both of you are going to be involved in those efforts at some point, and we're going to let our audience know about them. But definitely the fact that the conversation was so engaged is the proof that there is a lot to say, a lot to discuss about these issues. Before we proceed and go on to talk La Linea del Colore, we have a question from Edvigia Giunta, who is a professor of English literature at New Jersey State University and also an Italian-American writer. And with Eddie and her colleagues of the Italian-American Women Collective, we did so many initiatives at the Casa, and I think that's another group that we should bring in when we get together. These Italian-American women, many of them are writers, intellectuals, professors. Edvigia in particular is a memoirist, and she teaches memoir writing to students of all ethnicities at New Jersey State University. Her question is for both of you, because Eddie Giunta is asking, is there a body of children's and young adult literature by Afro-Italian writers? Anything written for children or young adults?
Yeah, children books from Afro-Italian.
Yes.
I've written one.
How come I don't know all these things about you, Igiaba? There are so many secrets about you.
I've written a book about rhinoceros. It's about a painting from 1751 that I found in Venice in a carrezzonico, because I love Italy because it's my country, but I love Italy for the art. You know, we are around you. You are a lot of paintings, monuments, and so on. You know, and I found this in Carrezzonico is a famous painting, but the story is a colonial story because there are a lot of Venetian masks, and in the center of the scene, a rhinoceros. I say, why rhinoceros in Venice? This is a history. And I discovered a famous story about this rhinoceros from India to Europe. A captain from Netherlands buy this rhinoceros from another Netherlands that live in India, and create a tour, a European tour from rhinoceros. And this rhinoceros came in Italy, in France, in Italy, in Rome. He lost his horn in Rome, and then it's a sad story. And in Venice, during the carnival, in the moment that Casanova go out from the jail, so it's a crazy moment. And I think a lot of this because it's a colonial frame, and I think this is a good idea for the children to explain, you know, slavery and colonialism from the children. And I use the rhinoceros in Venice, only in Venice. I put other two characters, a Jewish child from the ghetto of Venice, and a black slave, a little black slave, 8 years old, around 8 years old, from Venice. It's because, you know, the Moors, you know, all this stuff.
Moretti,
yes. So it's quite hard for black people to see.
Igiaba, what's the title in Italian of the book?
The title is Prestami le ali, storia di Clara la rinoceronte, because Clara, I've not invented the name of Clara. Clara is the name that put in the 18th century. They call Clara because the rhinoceros look like a fat German woman that called Clara. so really strange. And I use this book. This is the illustrations are really powerful. The illustrator Byzantine is really wonderful. And I remember, this one. Yeah, I'm in the cover. I'm sorry, with the guitar. I'm in the center of the cover with the guitar. I'm here. I'm in this cover, like Hitchcock. I love this, and I've done a lot of labs with children, and I enjoy a lot. And another book that I do, I'm creator of a book for. It's not children anymore, young adults. It's 11, 13 years old. Is anche Superman, anche Superman era un rifugiato. Even Superman was a refugee. So I asked to my colleagues to choose 2 refugees, one from famous Dante, Dante or Freddie Mercury, a lot of the Chico Buarque, yeah, this one, and a lot of people, and the true refugee. And this is a project that I do with UNHCR, and I remember the first review of this book. This is quite scary, but the first review of this book is from far right. Casa Pound, because they say they want to change the mind of our children. And I remember the first 2 days after the book published, they put how do you say striscione? I'm sorry.
A banner.
A banner from Orvieto in another city to say Enea wasn't a refugee. I remember that. And Enea wasn't a refugee. You are a liar. You want to change the mind of our people, change the mind of our children. It's a scary moment. And I say, this is really dangerous because they are against a book of children. This is, I remember that. It's a thing, really, it's not easy.
But Igiaba, on the other hand, it proves that you hit it on the head. If you cause Casa Pound to react to a children's book and come up with a banner, it means that you really scored a big point, because
and I think
that affected them, and they felt hurt and in danger.
Yeah, but the point, I know, I want to say something. I want to do something. Is the Roman Empire. We have to describe, and we have to do more books for children about Roman Empire and the mixity in Roman Empire, because the far right became mad. The crazy, and and more than Dante, and I think maybe Dante, they say Dante wasn't a refugee or something. No, Enea, because the mythology and Roman Empire is a key moment for fascism in general. And I think I want to do in the future a book from Roman Empire for children. This is my idea, because I know that they are, they have a lot of problem with the mixity of Roman Empire with African emperor or African people during that time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Igiaba. So we mentioned Superman era un rifugiato and Prestami Ideali, your two children's book available. And this was an answer for our friend Edvige Giunta, who just asked it.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to La Linea del Colore. It's your new book, recently published. You had to wait some 12 years to have Beyond Babylon translated into English. And we know that this is about to come out in English. So maybe something is really changing, because it's basically after only 1 year, your third book of the trilogy that includes Beyond Babylon, Adwa, and La Linea del Colore is going to be published into English. It's a fascinating story. Yes.
I want to say thank you to Ferrante. I think, Elena Ferrante opened the door for Italian writers. This is good for us, because they forgot Italians writers for a long time in the United States, and now they discover a lot of people, even famous people like Natalia Ginsburg, and so this is I think it's a good moment to rebuild, connection with from the two between the two countries. I say always that because I think Elena Ferrante was some that help us in that moment in the United
Absolutely.
States. Yeah.
She brought back contemporary Italian literature on the bookshelves, and it triggered the question, are there other writers in Italy? What are they writing? So we are probably riding a good wave, and you're right, we should take advantage of the Ferrante fever, as they call it.
Yeah, Ferrante fever. Yeah.
And your book, it kept me company in these days, and it's a beautiful read. And talking about breaking borders, we already heard it just in the summary of your children's book. The entire world comes in together, and nor is a literature of intrecciare. You braid and weave stories, the contemporary time, the historical perspective, places. Even here there are Italy, of course, Somalia, the United States, Ireland, Haiti. These are all places that come into this book. And of course, the center of everything is Rome. And in Rome, we start the story with the Cinquecento. That's where you left Adva, your previous book in the trilogy. It finishes at the Stazione Termini, Piazza dei Cinquecento. And who are these Cinquecento comes out in the first few pages of La Linea del Colore. And it all revolves around this fantastic character, Lafanu Brown, an African-American woman who leaves the United States and comes to Rome. We understand that in Lafanu Brown, there is a creature of your fantasy. There are actually two historical characters, two real African-American women who came to Rome in that magic moment in which Rome was perceived as a sort of a shelter for freedom, for people that were looking for freedom. It was after the end of the papal domination and before, of course, the fascist. So tell us something about the two women that inspired you and that are collapsed in these fantastic figure of you interweave their stories. And the amazing thing is that despite the fact that there are so many characters, so many different voices, there is the voice of the fictional author in the book. There is a contemporary woman who is the author of the story. In the part that you call incroci, that is sort of a pacing the different chapters of the book. And there are all these stories, and there is a remarkable unity in this book. Not a book in episodes or in closed vignettes. There is a remarkable unity. So tell us something about, first of all, about these two African-American women that come to Rome and that you combine in a genial way in Lafanu Brown. Who were they?
Okay. It's interesting because I discovered, these two women, and I became mad and say, oh my God, Black people in 19th century, because I love 19th century. I love novels and literature from that period, Jane Austen, Henry James, Edith Wharton, and so on, And when I discover Edmonia Lewis and Sarah Parker Remond that live in that moment, 1865, 1870s, in my city, say, oh my God, they live in my city to Afro-American. I want to know more about this story. And Sarah Parker Remond was buried in a Catholic cemetery in Rome. And she was an abolitionist, an activist, and became a midwife in Italy, in Florence. She studied in Florence and then came in Rome, and she was married a Sardo from Sardinia, a painter. So when she was 50, so it's wonderful. And Edmonia Lewis was a sculptor. She was an artist, and Edmonia was a Native American and Afro-American, both together. And she lived in Rome, in different places in Rome. Via della Frezza, or next to the Via del Corso, Via 4 Settembre, and I'm so, you know, I'm a fan of the Monia, and Monia was looked for the freedom all the time. She was artist and lesbian, so a lot of things together. So, but I want to do something different in my book, because my novel is a fresco. It's it's like, you know, Beyond Babylon is a sisterhood novel in a way. There are only two male characters, but two wonderful men, Ulisse Barbieri and Frederick Bailey. And Frederick Bailey, in my fantasy, is an alter ego. It's a Frederick Douglass in a way, but it's not Frederick Douglass. I think in Frederick Douglass, but it's of course it's different, because it's more fragile. My character is more fragile. It's not so powerful like Frederick Douglass, but I think a lot. And I put the name La Fanu, brown, because brown for the skin color, and La Fanu is from, you know, because I use the frame of Grand Tour and the frame of 19th century literature. And Le Fanu is the writer of Carmilla, the author of Carmilla, you know, the vampire story. Carmilla, I don't know. It's I don't know French, I'm sorry, but Le Fanu is the pronunciation. I change a little bit and say La Fanu, because I want to connect my character to the literature. And I love the moment that you invented the name of the character, you know. It's just a really wonderful moment for the writer to say, I want to put this name. Betsubea, sounds good, you know. And La Fanu sounds really good. And for me, it's important, that novel, to use the frame of Grand Tour, the travel the travel to Italy, because, you know, it's a travel. For example, the university, American university, are in Florence because of Grand Tour, because of this travel, you know. It's the
40 of them. 40 university, American university programs.
In general. And it's the people, the rich people used to do this kind of travel. And for me, it's quite amazing that two Afro-Americans do it in that time. With help, with rich people behind them, but they do it's not, you know, the people that used to do this kind of travel. And travel for me in that moment, meaning the desire of travel. And I put the modern part of the novel because I want to speak about the travel of refugees, the travel today. And the La Fanu in the 19th century, and Binti now. Binti was a Somali girl that tried to came in Italy, pay smugglers, and but her travel was interrupted, finished in before Libya. So it's for me, I want to explain, you know, this kind of travel in a different way, because I want to create empathy in the people. Because in Italy, when you speak about refugees, the people say, I don't want to hear, this is not my problem, I have my problem, I have no money, I have no job, you know. And I say, I want to create a Victorian novel to explain the problem that we have now with migration and refugee. And I want that explain the situation of passport, because I'm lucky, I have an Italian passport, but I'm Somali, and half of my family live with Somali passport. And Somali passport is a toilet paper in that moment. It's impossible to travel with Somali passport. So we need to change something, because it's really hard for me to see people die in the Mediterranean. It's really hard to see people raped because they dream to study in university. We need to change a little bit, and we have to create a legal travel for young people in Africa. And because for Africans, for example, Somali, it's difficult to travel even inside Africa. So I want to explain all this stuff, and I use, this frame of grand tour. Of course, it's not only this, because there are a lot of things I try to put together a lot of things, but this is my main goal in this book. And the other goal is Lafanu Brown is artists like me. Sometimes, the right of imagination is a little bit hard to find for us, because the people say, you are no writer, you are black, you speak only about yourself or about your experience. Of course, experience is something good, memoir is good, but I'm a novelist, I'm an artist. And for that reason, I try to create a woman like me, Lafanu. It's not autobiography, but this is autobiography in a way, that fight to become an artist. So art is so important for me. And another thing that I want to explain to this book is a Black Italy. All these monuments, Candice, with slavery heritage or colonial heritage. So in this book, more slavery, because we forgot that in Italy we have Mediterranean slavery from Northern Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, and Italy and Spain and Portugal. And it's quite interesting because Muslims became slave in Italy or in Spain, and Christian became slave in Tunisia or Algeria or something like that. So in that part of Africa. So it's not slavery like in the modern way, Atlantic. It's not Middle Passage, but this is slavery. So we see a lot of things in our monuments. For example, in a monument of Fontana di Cuatro Mori that I describe in the book. Yeah, that one is horrible, because really they use this monument for the La Sagra dell'Uva. The how do you say, the Sagra is the big, how do you say,
the festival of grapes,
the festival,
grapes,
the festival of grapes, because there is a song in my dialect, famous Roman songs. La fontana che dà il vino is the fountain that you give you a wine, and during the Sagra, this poor woman is covered with the grape, and no one in Marino know the history of the slave. Why slave in Marino? Why black slave in Marino? So I try to explain this in this book, because we have story of slavery in Italy too. We have to understand how and when, but we have to study in school. And this is a big problem. Colonialism and slavery is something that you can't find in school or in a book that our children use in a school. So big problem.
And Igiaba, you're so right in having brought these things up, not only in an historical perspective as you do, and you say very modestly in your past space about the making of the book that this is not an historical novel, but it is very well researched from an historical point of view. The characters are fictional, but the historical facts that you bring up are very, very historical. And it brings us to the topic of these conversations, that is stories with no borders, that you bring together, you break the borders, and you bring out the stories that everyone is entitled to have. And one thing that is also important is the connection between present day racism in Italy. That is an issue. We cannot pretend it doesn't exist. There are episodes of racism, sometimes violent, sometimes less violent, but there are episodes of racism on a daily basis.
Daily,
and
in daily life,
You witness that personally many times, and you see it on papers whenever it comes up to the surface. And it has to do with this sort of denied history of colonialism. You mentioned that there are certain expressions in Italian, names of battles, for example, that became part of the common language. In my dialect, people say, ma che Ambaradan. They don't know that it's a battle, that it was a huge defeat for the Italian army. So it's a disaster. They say they know it's a disaster, but they do not associate it with that specific location in Eastern Africa. It's a denied history, as the history of Italian immigration abroad is also denied. There were like 9 million of people between 1880 and 1920 that left Italy, especially southern Italy, to go to the New World. So these two denied history, the history of Italian colonialism, of the aggression to Africa, not only, as you remarked very well in your book, not only during fascism. We cannot say, oh, it was the dictatorship. No, Italy has a history of colonialism way before fascism.
Way before,
And it is as hidden, as not dealt with as the history of fascist colonial enterprises. So what is Italy supposed to do to come to terms with these colonial past, with this past of a nation of immigrants that seem completely disappeared? It has been denied, has been hidden, and it still is. I don't think that until we deal with that openly, we are ever going to get rid of racism. Until there is not a coming to terms with the fact that Italy has this past. And you do, of course, a lot on this topic. What can other people do, Igiaba, to help Italians to understand their history and therefore to eradicate racism?
Yeah, I think we have to answer this question. Are Italians white? I have the answer, no. And we are lucky because we are a lot of people mixed together. And Italians are, not only from now, but the history of Italy is the history of mixity. And this is the point for me, because Italians and Italy try to build whiteness. And this is a big problem, because whiteness is not a color. Whiteness is a social issue, is a social goal, it's a social issue. It's not really white or black or brown or so on. And I think it's a exclusive club. And I think Italians want to enter to this exclusive club. But it's you pay a lot. You lost your identity. You lost your way to stay in the world with other people. And this is important for us to understand that we aren't white. Not only me, because of course I'm a black, but all the people in this country, all the people in Italy, and we have to build a country really different in a way. We need, for example, a good law for citizenship for people like me, and a new law for immigration, for example, because the law of immigration is really awful. You became illegal for nothing. So we need to change a little bit, the way that we learn history in the school. And of course, we need a big movie about colonialism. Yeah, because I always think that, because for example, after the war, I love Italian movies. I once met Monticelli, and he told me that he stayed in Somalia, and I don't know nothing about them. I say, oh my God, Maestro, it's wonderful. How about where in Somalia and Kismayo? And Monticelli tried in the last days or last years of his life to do a movie about Libya, colonialism, so on. But we need to do something now, in a new way, in a post-colonial way, because it's strange. For me, it's so strange that I love the book of Masa Mengiste. It's really powerful. But now the movie of colonialism came from the book of Masa Mengiste, so came from Hollywood. It's just really strange. And it's wonderful, because we need a movie from colonialism. But we need to do an Italian movie. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So I want to see.
I like that you touched on the three crucial points.
Yeah.
One is a substantial change in the legislation. That is
Yeah,
fundamental.
yeah, fundamental.
The whole issue of citizenship is the main thing to address, because also it has very practical, immediate effects on the lives of people.
Yeah.
Second thing, the way in which we teach history. Once again, these are colonial enterprises are like 3 lines in history books, if you're lucky enough to have them. Italian mass migration to the New World, 2 lines if you're lucky, 9 million people displaced, gone forever. And the other important thing is movies, because I think the literature world, thanks to you and to many of your colleagues, it's lively, it's full of figures that are telling stories, that are bringing these issues to the front of the literature, of the literary world. But of course, the impact that movies have is paramount. It's more immediate. It reaches people who don't read books. And they are the ones that need, more than anybody else, to be exposed to these issues. So I think you synthesized perfectly the 3 ways in which we should push the cultural debate.
Because I'm so excited for that reason about Masa Mengistu book, novels. I've read in English, and I say this is important for us. Of course, it's a book for American people. The American people love a lot. It's a big success in the United States. But here became something more. We need the book of Masa Mengistu in that moment. And we need the movie, because when a lot of Italians go to see, I don't know, famous movie about colonialism, maybe they understand a little bit what happened in 19th century and 20th century. I want to say, wow, thank you, Masa, for that, because sometimes for us it's difficult to find, movie. Now it's a little bit, they want to do some series in Netflix about Afro-Italians, but it's quite difficult for us to enter in that world in Italy. It's quite difficult.
There is an interesting series right now on Netflix. My colleague Jesse Orozco actually mentioned that to me. It's called Summertime. And the protagonist is
so interesting, but it's okay.
It's for young adults. It's very generation based, and it's very well done technically, and it has a great soundtrack. It's very exciting. But at least some of these things are coming to the surface. Some, the quality might be different. You might have some stuff that is better than others. But Igiaba, I wanted to mention something to continue what you were saying. And I think we are running out of time, but we cannot let you and Candice go before we talk about this issue. Your book is also very visual. It's about visual art. It's about the impact of images and monuments and statues. And you've dedicated, as we mentioned, the book to the colonial images in Rome with beautiful photographs. And these couldn't be more timely a debate as it is now, both in the US, and Candice, we're going to go to you for that, and in Italy. The murder of George Floyd in the United States has triggered a series of protests that have gone way beyond the United States, in Rome, in Bologna, many parts of Italy, many parts of the world. And with these protests, also, there was another questioning of the presence of statues that are related to a racist history in all countries. The statues of King Leopold in Belgium, the statues of other historical leaders all over the world have been either defaced or painted over or knocked down. And right now in Italy, there is a debate about something that is very connected to colonialism. There is a statue of Indra Montanelli in the park in Milan that is dedicated to him. Indra Montanelli, for our viewers who are not familiar with him, was one of the most prominent Italian journalists, the editor of Corriere della Sera, founder of Il Giornale, with a very, very crude colonial past. He took part in the war in Africa during the fascist regime, and he admitted very candidly on television, I remember very vividly in an interview with Enzo Biaggi that he actually bought a young wife that was either 12 or 14, he didn't know, and had no regrets, expressed no regrets. He presented as a matter of fact thing, with how things were done. And now people are calling that into question. Can somebody like him still deserve a statue in a public park in Milan? And of course, Candice, in the United States, many statues are coming down. Some are leaders of the during the Civil War that were fighting against the abolition of slavery. But Christopher Columbus himself has been knocked out, the statues, from several locations in which they were displayed very prominently. And before I let you go, I want to know your take about history, monuments. What do we do with these monuments? What are we going to do with these monuments? Is it worth taking them down? Should they be on, but with caveats? What should be done? Should they be judged differently according to the time in which they were built or not? And this is an open question to both of you. And this is going to be also the closing of our conversation, because I think it's one of the lasting things. Monuments last more than war, more than our dialogues. So what are we going to do with them? Igiaba, you start, and then we listen to Candice about these issues in the States.
It's not easy question, but I have an idea. But I want to say something before about George Floyd. Rest in peace and rest in power, George Floyd, because it's our brother. And I'm so really, it's a painful moment for me, because when I see the video, I saw the video, and this is really something that I never forget. And I think of my nephews, I think in my relatives, I think in my brother. So it's a really hard moment for me, and a hard moment, I think, for all the Black people in the world. It's something really, really terrible to see. Terrible. And I so really happy when I see the people protest against this. And not only in United States, because of course in the United States, but all over the world. And it's so powerful moment in Italy, in Rome, Piazza del Popolo. Piazza del Popolo is one of the main, piazza in Rome. Is really beautiful, and it's like theater, And Piazza del Popolo, full of people, black, white, young people, a lot of young people, and taking knee, say peace and justice, mix slogan in Italian and in English. So I think it's one of the power moments in my life, really, because I think this is a key moment, not for Blacks only, for the world. It's a key moment because we understand something. We understand that we have to change. A change is gonna come, say Sam Cooke, Yes, it will. Yes, it's possible now. So I feel, it's just incredible, because I never forget all these people all together in all the world with the same feeling, and this is powerful. And of course, the history, all this stuff of the statue and the heritage of fascism here, or the slavery in the United Kingdom, and the slavery and the civil war in the United States, are something interesting for me, because I've written a book in 2014, Roma Negata. It's about fascism, heritage, colonial heritage in my city. And I have an idea about this heritage. We have to decolonize, not to destroy. I don't want to destroy, monument or statue. I want to decolonize, to try to do something, because it's different, Confederate statue and, a building, a rationalist building in, fascist building in Rome. So, because the statue is statue, but when you have a building, you use a building, you can change this building, and you could tell the story of the building, for example. And for example, I think in a map, for example, in Rome, in a building called Vigil. GIL meaning Gioventù Italiana del Littorio, is one of the organization of fascism, and inside this building you find a big map of Africa, empty Africa. It's scary because you see only Ethiopia and Africa, Italian Africa, and all the map is empty. And there is a big M of Mussolini and a sentence of Mussolini, noi tireremo dritto on the no, next to the map, next to the map. And next to the map you find all the city of that Italians destroyed during the war against Ethiopia. It's a really scary map. I don't want to destroy, I want to put something. I want to use this map empty, for example, for movies, for performance. It's a quite interesting things that we have to do. And I will finish, I want to say we need in Italy to do more exposition about Black people, art, for example, and we need a museum of fascism. Really, not a fascism to glorify fascism, but to explain what happened, because something happened in Italy and it's impossible to forget. And we need a place to understand what happened in that moment. And about, of course, colonialism, because no one knows about colonialism in Italy.
Thank you for sharing. Oh, Stefano, I think your mic is off.
Yeah.
Thank you, Igiaba. Very, very clear. Your proposal is very clear. You don't want to knock down monuments. You want to transform them and use them, teach things.
Yeah,
Candice, what is your take on the same issue?
So to start, I'm going to be similar in my approach with Igiaba and just acknowledge just like the time that we're in. Today is the 5th year anniversary of the murder of the worshipers at AME Church in South Carolina. June 2nd was the murder of Sumaila Sako. So there's a lot going on, and that happened. There's this pattern of just these tragedies and murders taking place over the summer. Igiaba, I remember in one of your interviews, I think it was with Vanity Fair a few weeks ago, you came out, you shared that in the US, there's not as much connection with what's happening today to the history that's occurred. And that just reminded me of how, you have the Red Summer in 1919, and you have folks returning from the war who are not treated as citizens or even just as human beings for protecting the United States as military members. And right now in the world we're living in, yes, there's of course anger about the murder of George Floyd. There's also anger about just the disproportionate deaths occurring to Black and brown folks in the US. And I've also read a bit about how that's happening in Italy as well. And so I think there is just a lot of underlying things that are happening where it's you can't, let's say, turn away from it. And for the question about statues, I think that it's important definitely to reckon with that history. And I've read arguments that putting an abolitionist might be better. And I think for me, something that comes to mind as, let's say, brainstorming what could go in its place is just asking the question if anyone is actually infallible enough to be in stone. Is there anything infallible enough to be in stone? And for me, that question is, I'm not sure. There are other ways to celebrate people. There are ways, I know in the US, there's been brainstormings to commemorate people like Harriet Tubman, putting her on money. Is that really the best way to commemorate her? Put Harriet Tubman on money? It's Harriet Tubman. She was fighting against that exact type of capitalist system. So I think when it comes to remembering people and situations and just events in history, it's really important of the squad, though, the gaze that we want to give, and making sure that it I think that it just represents the truth of that individual or that moment in time and the work that occurred, or the danger or whatever occurred. I think it's just important that the sguardo is not something that leans to be neutral or glorifies solely. So that's my answer to this question about statues, and I do want to thank you for inviting Igiaba and myself to speak and also to share about Future. We are looking for a publisher, so for the translation. So I hope that there will be that in the future.
Great point, Candice. We were forgetting that. We are still looking for a publisher for Future, for future. Yeah. And once you get it, that's going to be the chance we're going to have to bring Igiaba back to New York physically. The virus is going to be over.
I miss New
York. Together. And we have a question from one of our members of our audience, Giulia Lisella, says, include biracial Italian African-American women in the discussion. Of course we will. This is only one of the many steps in this discussion. As we mentioned before, there are many issues that we're addressing tonight. This is one of the longest episodes of Tutti a Casa and one of the most exciting. And that's we need to continue the conversation in a more systematic way. And yes, both of you are going to be involved. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for having been with us tonight and for having led us into this conversation of discovery and understanding. And before we leave our audience, I would like to remind them that the next episode of Tutti a Casa is going to air next Wednesday, June 24th, 5 p.m. in New York, 11 p.m. in Italy. The title is going to be Across the Table, Reinventing Sicilian Food with Mangia with Michelle. Wow. The guest is going to be Michelle Di Pietro, who has a very successful broadcast about Sicilian food, and Roberto Scarcella Perino, a colleague at New York University, who's a musician, a composer, and a chef. And they're going to talk about food, and they're going to talk about what's behind food, histories, culture, society. So don't miss the next episode of Tutti a Casa with Michelle Di Pietro and Roberto Scarcella Perino next Wednesday, 5 p.m. in New York, le 11 in Italia. Grazie a tutti e buona serata. Grazie Igiaba e grazie Candice.
Grazie, ciao.
Grazie, ciao.